Monday afternoon seminar series. It's great to see many of you here, and we have the distinct honor of welcoming today a member of our materials management research group team. So the Mitchell Center has a team of researchers, interdisciplinary, from engineers, anthropologists, community psychologists, economists, working on materials management. So questions about how we can reduce waste, but also recover the waste that we generate. And we are fortunate to have some members of our team on other campuses, including the University of Southern Maine. So today we have with us Dr. Travis Wagner, who is a professor in the Department of Environmental Science and Policy at the University of Southern Maine. Travis has a wide range of expertise related to public policy on environmental issues, but he's perhaps most known for his wide body of research on sustainable materials management. In various ways, Dr. Wagner's work has contributed to our understanding of policy models designed to reduce and recover waste by studying everything from the size of recycling containers to pay-as-you-throw programs, product stewardship programs, and every other week collection schemes. His publication record demonstrates this expertise in materials management with recent publications in peer-reviewed journals ranging from the Journal of Environmental Studies and Sciences, Environmental Communications, Journal of Environmental Management, Resources, Conservation, and Recycling, and several articles in Waste Management, one of the premier journals in this field. In all this work, Dr. Wagner draws on his experience in environmental consulting, as well as some time at the US EPA's Office for Toxic Substances, and his formal education. So he has a PhD in public policy, specializing in environmental and natural resources, from the George Washington University, a Master's of Public Policy from the University of Maryland, College Park, and a BS from Maine's Unity College. So,
great.
You have some Unity cards. So, Travis, thank you so much for
Great,
coming.
thanks you. Yes, thank you. Glad to see so many people here interested about plastic bags. So, I'm going to talk about basically the ability or approach local governments have in sustainable materials management. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about today, just to give you a roadmap, is the role of source reduction in sustainable materials management, municipality options for source reduction, and then I'm going to focus on single-use shopping bags. A lot of my research talks about shopping bags right now in styrofoam or expanded polystyrene. I'm not going to talk about that today because there's just not enough time. So I'm going to focus on shopping bags, talk about the different policy approaches that we can reduce those, and then talk about what's happening in the state level, and then what's specifically happening in Maine municipalities right now with shopping bags, and then just do some observations and conclusions. So as most of you probably know, well, I'll say my take on sustainable materials management is really decrease disposal as much as possible. And part of that is to reduce the environmental impacts of materials through the whole life cycle. And then also what's important is to increase the capacity of state and local governments to deal with it. So if it's just at the federal level, what we're seeing is not much action. And so state and local governments have to get more involved in sustainable materials management. And for me, the key aspect is source reduction. I'm going to talk about each one of these here in a second. So looking at the waste management hierarchy, which I personally am a fan of, not everyone is, if you read the editorial last week, it's really about decreasing the volume and or toxicity. Most people talk about reducing the volume, but I believe that if you reduce the toxicity as well, that is equally important, especially when you're dealing with some of the persistent, bioaccumulative, and toxic compounds. So source reduction is about prevention, not creating a material to begin with, so it doesn't become a waste. Reuse, and part of that is product substitution. An example of this is what we're seeing right now in the solid waste stream is lightweighting. So that's where the packaging is becoming much lighter, which is great from a life cycle potential. If you are a recycler, it's terrible, because a lot of this is multiple layers, very difficult, if not, it's just not recyclable right now. But it has benefits in that aspect. But that's an example where you're reducing the amount of materials, but you're increasing the complexity, which is a trade-off. So AIRS is a researcher who wrote this piece back in '89 who said, you know, a benchmark is that if you look at the upstream ratio to downstream, it's about 42 to 1. And that really fluctuates, it really depends on the waste, but that's a good benchmark. And what he's talking about here is most of us focus on the end of life, a lot of it, and we don't deal with the upstream. So if I took a, whatever, 1 pound waste, what he's saying, and it's at the end of its life, and I'm going to either reuse, recycle, burn it, or bury it, it represents upstream about 42 pounds to generate that, whether it's petroleum, fiber, mineral, whatever. But you can see all the basic steps that require input, energy. If energy goes in, waste and pollution comes out, and waste energy. So it gives you an important aspect about why we look at sustainable materials management. You've got to look at the whole life cycle. Now, the question then is, if we look at the life cycle of a material, we have the different rules of government. What is their capacity to actually foster or mandate source reduction? We have really an international body, a national, sort of the subnational, which is state and provincial, and then local or municipal. So with international, we can do treaties, we can do multilateral treaties, sort of like the Basel Convention on exports of hazardous waste, the Montreal Protocol for ozone-depleting substances. We have bilateral agreements. For example, the U.S. has a bilateral agreement with Mexico that we can only ship hazardous waste there for recovery, not disposal. We have other bilateral agreements. But there's limitations with the World Trade Organization about what you can and cannot do. And there's issues with international treaties as well. But that is one mechanism by which you can, again, foster or mandate source reduction. The national approach, primarily, a lot of it's through expanded producer responsibility or product stewardship, just shifting the responsibility of a product back onto the producer or sharing that. For example, the German Green Dot for packaging has been pretty instrumental in source reduction in packaging. We can mandate source reduction. So there's the ROSE directive, which is the reduction of hazardous substances, primarily in electronics, which is a EU directive. But we get to benefit because most of the electronics you purchase now are probably ROSE compliant. We have the WE directive, also EU, which is the waste electrical electronics, sort of like the e-waste. And they're focusing on that as well as mandating some sort of source reduction. And these are all at the national level. But this is not happening in our country. As far as state and provincial, we have extended producer responsibility, which is not at the national level. We're doing that really in the U.S. at the state level. Maine has been the leader. We passed the first compact force and light product stewardship, auto switch, mercury auto switch, electronic e-waste. So Maine's been a leader in that. But again, that's at a state level. We can do landfill bans. So if anyone's familiar with Vermont's new universal recycling law, mandating curbside collection, doing statewide landfill bans, it's a state approach to really kind of, again, try to foster source reduction. And you can do deposit refund systems like bottle bills as a way also to kind of foster some of that directly and indirectly. But when you get down to municipalities, we have as a municipality, and that would be local, tribe, county, any sub-state or sub-provincial government, you have very limited authorities as to what you can do if you're trying to achieve source reduction. There's that Constitution. The Commerce Clause restricts what you can do because you can't impede the free flow of articles of commerce. That's really a federal level, and so some state, local implications. Maine's municipal authorities confer directly through the state constitution based on the municipal home rule. So the state, and all states, tell a municipality what you can and cannot do and establish what your authorities are. So it limits what you can do. So at the end of life for solid waste, most Maine municipalities, these have been their primary tools in their toolbox, is you can do single, no sort, where you combine everything in the recycling bin. You can do curbside collection. Both of those focus on just increasing the convenience to the household. You can do pay-as-you-throw using an economic incentive to try to get you to decrease or maybe shift it over and do more recycling. You can do free recycling, so pay for your trash, you don't pay for your recycling. We have green waste and some organics programs. The problem with these is they all seek to increase really recycling and diversion. So that's a key aspect of sustainable materials management, but it doesn't get at source reduction, which is truly the prevention. Don't produce it in the first place. So with municipalities, again, there's federal and state limits as to what you can do. There's limited interest in upstream effects. So I talked about this great, 42-1 in upstream. If you take a small typical town in Maine, and they're debating about these issues, do they really care about the upstream waste? To some degree, that could become a component of the argument, but for the most part, the concern is about what's the direct economic impact of that town. So in the world of sustainable materials management, we're really focusing on that upstream, but that doesn't mean people that are implementing it are as perhaps concerned as we are. Or their ability to affect that, I think for a lot of people, are probably not as obvious. So we have, with local governments, they're much more highly sensitive to local costs and impacts within the borders, as you would expect. So that poses the question is, what then can municipalities do? I've just said what they can't do, but what is it that they can do? So what we have seen recently, relatively recently, is the restriction on the sale or use of certain products. If those products are primarily single-use products, designed to be single-use and high consumption, they have local environmental impacts. There's no cost-effective recycling options for those materials once they reach their end of life. And finally, reuse is not viable or likely, and there's readily available substitutes. So if you meet these basic criteria, then there's a role for municipalities. So two examples of this are single-use shopping bags. And this is especially plastic, but some municipalities view all single-use shopping bags in the same category. And single-use expanded polystyrene foodware, under its commonly known trade name as styrofoam, which is your clamshells, trays, bowls, cups, and so forth. So like I said, I'm going to just talk about shopping bags because of time. But the other thing that's happening right now is a lot of focuses on the EPS foodware as well. So I'm going to go into detail about single-use shopping bags. So the focus here for most municipalities are bags with handles that are less than 2.5 mils, that are predominant, and this is for the plastic bags. So it doesn't include what's called barrier bags, and those are the bags that you use inside a store to get your product from the produce section to the point of sale, because they don't have handles, is one way to distinguish them. It doesn't include dry cleaning bags, newspaper bags, if you're one of the few of us that still get home delivered newspaper. It doesn't include product bags, so sometimes you'll purchase something, they're included in plastic bags. It doesn't include all that. But the universe, just with this, is quite large, but if you think about the universe of plastic bags and what we collectively call film, it's quite large. And the two predominant bags are HDPE number 2, which is your typical grocery bag, and the LDPE number 4 tends to be your higher scale retail bag. So if you're shopping at LL Bean, I don't know if they use plastic bags, but if they did, they would say LL Bean, it would be the heavy duty, thicker plastic bag. That's your LDPE. Predominantly petroleum based. Yes, there's a few out there that are not, but this dominates the market. If you're dealing with paper bags, that's your craft paper, the brown paper of various sizes. And when it's governed under the shopping bags, it's really just the large bags. It's not the small bags that you might go to a grocery store, they might stick your milk in a bag and then in another bag. So it's the large craft paper bags, which are the target. Now, some facts. So based on a study, the average, what they call utility, so the average lifespan of a bag is 12 minutes. So when you get it at the point of sale, you get to your house, and then you do whatever you do with it. It's 12 minutes. Not very long. In the US, in 2016, there's 1.6 visits per shopper just for groceries. So we go to the grocery store quite a bit. This doesn't include non-groceries like retail and other kind of materials, but 1.6 times per week. Now the per capita consumption is this big mystery number because a couple reasons. One is it's not tracked. Grocery stores and other retailers don't like to provide this information because they view it as confidential because it's used to like shopping frequency. And the other thing is they just don't track them. So a lot of our research is done on post, where some places have done imposed taxes or fees, which obviously very much skews your consumption. And there's been some estimates. But the overall range is about 335 to 703. I think the best number I saw is about 360. So that's 360 plastic shopping bags per person per year in the US. And that's just the shopping bag with the handles. Maine did a study back in 1989. This data is from the Maine Merchants Association, in which their estimate was back in '89, 268.8 plastic bags per person per year. Paper, very weak, much worse numbers, but the estimate is between 43 and 119 paper shopping bags. Maine, at that same year, they determined it was 122 per person per year. And obviously, there's so many things that can change this. How many stores, what type of stores? We know from research that people shopping at like Whole Foods versus the dollar store, to use two extremes, very different type of shopping and consumer habits and bag habits. It's household income. All these things are important aspects. So you have to look at these numbers. That's why I like ranges instead of that bright line, because it takes into account that there's lots of variables. Now, why is it a problem? So, plastic bags are very light, and you've seen them. They balloon. What's called balloon. Once the air picks up, they magically, or not so magically, leave your recycling container, even though they shouldn't be in there in the first place, and escape. And what goes up comes down. So litter is one of the big problems. So we have land-based litter. It's a stormwater issue. So TMDL, which is total maximum daily load, which is basically for surface water. It's the first designated water or section of water, estuary lake. It's the total maximum pollution budget that you could have in that water body. What we're seeing now for the sort of, what's kind of interesting is litter is now becoming one of those pollutants. So we have them in Maine for like phosphorus and some other pollutants. Nutrient loading is a big one. But in the Chesapeake Bay area, they actually have it for litter, which is not just bags, but it's they have a big problem with water bottles, which like to float, especially people with the cap on them, and styrofoam. Marine litter, pretty significant issue. Garbage patch, garbage. What do they call it? The ear garbage gyre. Thank you. The giant garbage gyre, which is predominantly plastic. It has a direct cost to municipalities because plastic bags impair stormwater catchment. So you have to do more frequent cleanouts, or you get backup in flooding. The other thing what's interesting is even so you could illegally dispose of it as litter, or you could say, no, I'm going to collect this, ship it off, all legally and acceptable, and it also becomes litter. So one of the number one pictures like from a landfill catchment fence. One of the biggest complaints is litter from landfills, and it tends to be plastic bags because they balloon off and they're a huge problem. They're hard to manage. There's a very low recycling rate. So the EPA estimates that it's 13.5%, but this is for HDPE film. They do not pull out just bags. This is like the film that you might wrap pallets of products with, sort of that, which is a high quality film. Now, the reason why I put an asterisk with EPA, this is from their municipal solid waste studies, which comes out every year. Their data is notoriously bad. So it's not based on waste characterization, it's based on predictive modeling, based on economy and these other aspects. So it's been shown that they underestimate generation and overestimate recovery. So you have to look at that, and it's not a good number. But it makes the data is good for longitudinal purposes, but you have to be very careful about using their data because it's not based on waste characterization, which is what it should be. Luckily, there's a lot of states that do this, so you can fill this in. So California is actually focused on single-use plastic bags. They did it just 1 year. Their recycling rate was 3%. Illinois did it for, I think it was, might have been Cook County. It was a county in Illinois. Their estimate was 1.5%. Well, what is up with that? So the problem is that it's a really low-value commodity, the plastic film, because really you downcycle it. So it's got to be used for, what do they use? Like traffic bumpers is the classic, or kiddie pools or whatever. So it's downcycled to a lower value product. And if you really want to maximize the value, if you really want to get the maximum amount of money for that collected bags, you have to separate it out. So how do you do that? So you have to do it at the curb, or you have to do it at the materials recovery facility or transfer facility. Well, the problem with bags is if you don't pull them out separately and they get brought to the transfer facility or the Maine materials recovery facility, they get caught in the machines. So if you've ever been to, if you haven't, you should really tour a processing facility. And they have, this is actually from, I think this is the Maine, where after every shift in Portland, after every shift, they have workers climb out on these the rubber stars with box cutters and start cutting away the plastic. It takes them about an hour every day. It has low value, so it actually impedes the recycling as much as possible. So they don't like them, they don't want them. Most communities do not want plastic bags because they're not set up to handle that. So what do is if they do get them, they mix them with number 3 through 7 plastic, which is the really low grade stuff. So historically, until about 2009, it was at about $0 to $10 a ton. In other words, if you got a ton of number 3 through 7, you were just giving it away. But there's a cost avoided because you're not having to dispose of it, so you save that. But recycling is never free. There's always a cost to that. Sometimes the market was up a little bit. It was going to China for $10 a ton, in part because a lot of shipments were coming from China, and they could backhaul this because the container ships were going back, they were empty. They'll take this for a small amount. And so that was great. The market is a negative market right now. So Maine is now paying $20 to $50 a ton to ship this plastic off. So it's a negative value, not to mention the cost to remove it and all the other costs associated, what I talked about, impairment and litter. So it's just not a good product that you want as a municipality. This is plastic. One study was done that 51% of the plastic carryout bags that they have were reused, which is good. That's on the waste hierarchy. They were used, most of them were used predominantly as trash bags. One study talked about plastic shopping bags are reused 1.6 times. Paper is reused 2.7 times, which is great. The problem, of course, is after that 1.6, what do you do with it? Then there's no that market doesn't exist for it at that point because of the recycling market and the whole collection segregation issue. So, why am I doing this? Oh, so reusable. Oh, that's right. Available substitutes. That's one of the criteria. And yes, so I'm sure everyone here probably has too many. I was thinking about this: is how many reusable bags I actually have right now because people just were giving them away. But cotton, not so good. Jute, hemp. There's polypropylene, polyethylene. The cost to these is about $1 to $10 a piece. And when you're thinking about viable substitutes, what is the cost for that? And what's the cost displacement, cost benefit? So single-use paper bags, the good news is recycling rate is much higher. This is an EPA estimate, so but it's probably a little bit more in line. But 50%, it seems within the wheelhouse. But they're a lot more costly to the retailer. So I went on a wholesaler, actually it was just yesterday, looking at what's the actual cost right now, market cost. So for the standard, without handles, craft shopping bag, it's 19 cents a piece, but you have to buy like 10,000. Plastic is 3.5 cents. They weigh a lot more. So paper weighs 2.4 ounces a piece, plastic 0.24 ounces. So the significance of that is not only are they cheaper for a retailer, but the shipping costs are dramatically less. And the greenhouse gas is much less just in the transportation because you'll be able to ship far more units. So if you're a retailer, your rational response would be plastic. The problem with paper is that numerous studies have done the comparative life cycle assessment, and it's universally viewed as much worse if you look at the whole life cycle. Sure, the end of life is much better with paper because recycling rate's better and there's a better market for plastic, but if you look at the production, pulping, milling, transportation, and the greenhouse gas and energy footprint, right now, paper's much worse. So, to have to think about what are our policy options to really, again, try to foster that source reduction at the local level. So your goal is reduce or eliminate single-use shopping bags. So the basic primary tools are you can do some sort of ban. You can use economic incentives through taxes or fees. You can do some sort of product design aspect, education, or mandatory recycling opportunity. And we've done, there's been municipalities that have done every one of these. I'm going to talk about the kind of pros and cons of these before I talk about what's happening in Maine right now. So for the most part, bans, plastic has been the primary target. I have only found one community that banned all single-use shopping bags, paper or plastic. But most of them are plastic-only ban. If you want to eliminate problem, ban it. It's the best thing in the world. However, you're going to get some angry people because, and certainly in some communities, consumer choice is such a paramount thing. So eliminating your choice as a consumer is not a popular option. Politically, it can be very difficult to do any type of ban. And one of the problems, what I've seen in the research is when you do a plastic-only ban, you see a big shift to paper consumption. And if we accept that, based on the end of the life cycle studies, that paper is much worse, then that's an overall negative problem. So it might represent a positive benefit locally because it can be recycled, but if you look at the entire life cycle, it's much worse. So the first plastic bag ban was in 1990 in Nantucket, Massachusetts. But it wasn't until 2007 that San Francisco's plastic ban was a linchpin. So this is an interesting story. So San Francisco originally, I'm going to talk about this in a second again, they originally decided to come up with a fee. It was 13-cent fee. And I'll explain why that's such an odd number. So 13-cent fee on single-use plastic shopping bags. The basically the plastic bag manufacturing lobby is pretty strong. They came in there and they got California to do a preemptive law that said, no, you cannot you cannot do fees on plastic bags. So what did San Francisco do? Said, fine, we're going to ban them and then do a fee on paper bag. Didn't say we couldn't do that. And that's what they did. And once San Francisco did, the number of municipalities in California that did that exact same model is unbelievable. So what happened in California now is they passed a state law that basically would remove the state preemption. There was a lawsuit, and it's actually on the ballot as a citizen initiative this November, whether there's going to be a statewide, I think it's just remove the preemption on plastic bags. So in 2015, Honolulu County banned non-reusable plastic bags, and with a lot of these ordinances, they're very specific, because you've got an ordinance, you have all these definitions. They define plastic bags as anything that is less than 2.25 milliliters. So right after that, retailers started distributing free reusable bags that were exactly 2.25 milliliters. Unintended consequences. Other communities said, ooh, we're not going to do that. And so they said, you can't distribute any free. You have to charge for any bag. And there's various ways to get around that. But, when you're doing policy, it's always, what are the negative unintended consequences? So you can do the tax or fee. So this is a different approach, using economic incentive to change, you could say, guide behavior. But municipalities in Maine can't tax. You can charge a fee. There's some municipalities in the country, not very many, that have the authority to tax. In Maryland, some of the counties do. A basic difference is tax, the revenue is kept by the government. You can do a fee, which is kept by the retailer. And now the term they like to use instead of a fee is a pass-through charge. Now, Ireland was the first country to do the plastic bag tax in 2002. It was a 15-cent per bag plastic tax. Consumption decreased 90% down to 21 bags per person a year, which is dramatic. It then increased up a little bit, which is the rebound effect where it drops and then slowly rises up a little bit. And Ireland said, well, we're going to change that. And so they raised the tax to 22 cents, and the consumption decreased back down to that. But their paper bag consumption has not, it didn't just shift, because they were trying to get the paper bag out and try to just focus on reusable. So it's part of that education and incentive program. So once Ireland did it, it was sort of, we're always looking for who did it first so that we can study from them. Victoria, Australia did it. They also found a 90% decrease. So there was a study in Portugal, which is interesting, in which they got supermarkets to agree to a 2-cent plastic fee. So they got a number of grocery stores that voluntarily agreed to this program, and then they studied this. And what they found is that 12%, now faced with that 2-cent tax, 12% declined bags, and those that grocery stores where there was no fee, only 5% declined that. And you can see the number of reused bags went up significantly. But what I found really interesting is looking at the maximizing of the bag volume. So I'm sure you've gone to the grocery store and you buy that quart of milk, and they stick that quart of milk in a single bag. Hey, it's bag's free, whatever. So you take that. Now if you have to pay for it, even though it's only 2 cents, it's sending that price signal. It's like, well, wait a minute. And so what they found is that people will maximize that volume bag in an effort to reduce the bags. So, it wasn't 13 cents, it was 17 cents. San Francisco's original fee proposal, that's kind of a bizarre, but it was actually kind of cool, if you're economists, because what they did was, what's the externality cost for a plastic bag? And they came up with this figure by saying, well, if it contaminates the recycling stream, that's the value of that. Negative of that is 1.4 cents. If it gets into compostables, you have to do additional labor to pull that out. That's 0.8 cents. Just the collection, labor, litter cleanup, processing in landfills. So the the externalized cost is 17 cents. So that's the fee, 17 cents, which is pretty cool. We don't do that as much as when I was at that Pagovian guy. So the Pagovian tax, great. But then the state kicked in and said they preempted it. But it shows you, from this, it shows you the cost, or one group's interpretation of the cost of a bag. So this is where my research is not done. There's, how many? I think right now there's about 250 ordinances that I'm going through. One of the things is a lot of this is not in the academic literature. It's in the gray literature, which just takes a tremendous amount of effort to try to find and dig through. And the other thing I notice is that people keep repeating the same data points, but I never can find out what they are. Or they just keep repeating them. And come to find out, a lot of them are false. So what that means is I've had to go through and look at every one of these ordinances, and I'm still not done. But it's luckily will be over soon. But so it's incomplete data, but I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through. So looking at taxes or fees, I've seen nothing, no community yet that's taxed just plastic. About 80% of the communities have taxed or put a fee, not taxed, but put a fee just on paper. But that's usually combined with a plastic bag ban. What's interesting, in part because of what happened in Honolulu, a number of ordinances prevent a retailer from giving away for free any paper or reusable bag. And that way, it prevents that giving away, plastic bags that are reusable. So it mandates that they can't do it for free. They have to charge. And then all bags, anything that's taxed is only about 5%. So the mean fee is 10% and the mode is 10%. There's a few communities in Colorado that charge 5 cents, and there's a number of them in the San Francisco Bay Area that charge 25 cents. But for the most part, it's 10 cents. So you can do product design. So you can do pro-environmental imprints. You can do the minimum recycled content for paper, which is done in a number of these ordinances. It's usually 40% post-consumer content. There's minimum specs for a plastic reusable bag, which has not worked really well. But this is an example of a cloth base, which I pulled this out of ordinance. It's got to be washable fabric, at least 2.25 mils thick, minimum life of over 75 uses, can carry 18 pounds. Some of them say over X number of feet, which is always, so it's sort of that performance base. So if you do performance base, there's a little bit less wiggle room often to do that unintended negative aspect. So education, to me, education is always essential, but never sufficient, because all you're doing is, in our most traditional, what I call passive education, is you're just imparting information and hoping that people will change their behavior. Now this is what's interesting. This research just came out like 2 weeks ago. And what's the name of the journal? I have it written down somewhere, but it's like the Journal of Consumer Technology Research. I'm messing it up, so I'll stop there. But what they found out is that there's reduced male participation in environmental actions seen, I guess, in society as more feminine. One of the examples they said was bringing reusable bags. And what the authors were arguing is that because reusable bags is a green behavior, and that's viewed as more feminine, then you're not going to get, males are not willing to do that. Why is that significant? Well, in looking at the Food Market Institute's recent study, 2016, 79% of U.S. adult men are now categorized as significant grocery shoppers in the household. So what they're seeing is this trend is that more and more adult males are participating in the shopping. So what this might suggest, I guess what I'm trying to suggest here is that if that's the case, if you're relying on education to bring your own bag, then it might not work as well with males, which are becoming more and more prominent shoppers. And this is for grocery shoppers. The other thing is you can do mandatory recycling opportunity. So where retailers, if you're going to offer a plastic bag, you have to provide convenient post-consumer recycling. It's a de facto retail take-back program. This imposes a cost back on the retailer because they have to maintain that, keep it clean, bag it, ship it. Hopefully they have a market to pay for it, and it might or may not cover their costs. But this just, again, supports recycling. It doesn't achieve source reduction. And actually, I think it's worse because people feel better if they can recycle. So then you tend to not be so concerned about source reduction because, hey, you're recycling it. 237, that was my number. So this just looks at the effective date, because to me that's more important than when you pass it, but when did it actually kick in? And there's a couple outliers before 2008, but it's really starting to pick up. 2004 was a watershed year. 2016, 2017 are incomplete, and the year's not over. I know there's some communities that are considering this right now. So it's becoming much more prominent. The other thing I'm trying to do is look at the population, and I'm not there yet, but so far it's like 13 million. I still haven't gotten to the big cities. So it's probably going to be about 10% of the U.S. population is covered by some sort of bag ordinance. So there's bag ordinances in 21 states. Some of them, like Iowa, there's only one community, and a few others, which includes D.C. The top 5 states with ordinances: California, in part because of what the state did in San Francisco, but Massachusetts, Alaska. Mostly with Alaska, it's tribal communities. There's a lot of tribal communities, and it's really hard to get ordinances from them. So that's going to be a difficult part. But there's many of them: New York, then Washington, and then Texas along the coast, the bay there. So, what about Maine? So at the state level, in 1989, they had the bag ask law, what I call the bag ask law, which says that Maine had to hand, at a retailer, they had to hand out paper bags only, unless you said, no, I want plastic. So it became that choice architecture, like that nudging, is like, no, you have to do paper bags. The thought being is that plastic was bad, paper was good. 1989, we were probably producing some more in the state, I don't remember. So there was positive state level impacts as well. 1991, we repealed the bag ask law. And instead, there's actually a state law, still in the books, that all retailers that offer plastic bags have to have a plastic bag recycling within 20 feet of the main entrance, the main entrance, and they have to recycle those plastic bags. So next time you're in a grocery store or retailer, see if they're in compliance. I don't think it's ever been enforced. Then the law also says that there has to be a work group to submit a report on the reduction of bag consumption in the state. So the bag report came out in this is the first one they've done too. The first one came out, and a lot of this was data from the Maine Merchants Association, which decided to do a survey and their own study. And what they found out, no surprise, plastic bags decreased by 267 million, paper bags increased by 250 million. So we saw the shift. So the substitution effect just went from one right up to the other. And part of this is driven by if someone's giving you get habitualized into getting a free bag. You sort of expect that. And you don't understand the ramifications of taking that bag. And so we saw this shift right to paper. Well, the grocery stores, the Maine Merchant Association was not happy with this, in part because of the cost. What this is just showing that the shift in groceries was in 89 it was roughly about the same, and then it stopped in 90, and then there was a shift from paper. But what they were saying with retailers didn't want to hassle with the plastic and recycling, so they predominantly went all paper. And that's department stores and so forth, so non-groceries. But they also found out that even though they had all this plastic bag receptacles and it was mandatory, the recycling rate was only 18% for plastic bags. Part of that was if you're a smaller store and you're collecting less plastic, you have your economies of scale. So if you have a small amount, it's really hard to get that recycled because it's just the commodity markets. Paper bags are more than double the cost over plastic, so there was a significant cost impact to the retailer. And I'm sure, because I know this is happening many times, is actually there was some community that banned double bagging. So you go to the store and, wow, one's good, two's got to be better. And they double bag the paper. I know some communities have banned that, but that was also likely part of the response to that, because they're not as strong as plastic. So there was a negative economic impact to retailers, and of course the upstream environmental impact was also negative. 2009, they proposed a 10% fee on plastic bags, but instead that got amended in committee and said, let's do a bag report. Let's study it instead. And so the solution was, they did a report and they go, no, we're going to do a statewide education program called Got Your Bags. The goal was to reduce shopping bags consumption by 33%. Anyone seen this logo? Oh, it's not working though. I was searching for this and there was a Twitter account. So I don't know but it stopped in like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. So it's not working. And again, education, not only is it is essential, not necessarily effective, it's only effective if you keep putting money into it. You can't just do one shot, it's going to be all the time. And they actually can get quite expensive. Okay, how are we doing? Doing okay? Okay. So I just want to finish up with so what are Maine municipalities doing? So as of right now, there's 6 municipalities that have bag ordinances. Portland was the first, York, Freeport, South Portland, Kennebunk, and Falmouth. Topsom, it's on the November ballot, which was the agreement with the town council. Bangor is actually studying it right now, and Brunswick is studying it. But interestingly, Brunswick already passed a polystyrene ordinance, foodware ordinance. A lot of these will do it. I think it's about 40% of the communities that have one also have the other, and they passed that first and are studying the bag. So I think we're going to wait to see what happens in Topsom. So it's good to have political cover. So, but what's interesting is each of these communities have done somewhat a little bit different approach. So Portland did a 5-cent bag on fee on all bags. There's no bans. Started last year, and they define it has to have 2% sales of food, but it doesn't cover restaurants. So if you go to your restaurant takeout, you don't have to pay 5 cents. Part of this is their argument is, well, most people aren't, even if you take reusable bags, you're not going to go to a takeout or McDonald's with your reusable bag. They probably wouldn't want to put it in there because of food safety issues or liability. So it's one of those that it's not really that feasible, would be the general agreement. Not every community does that. Some people say, no, we're just going to charge anyways. York banned plastic bags only, and any retailer except nonprofits or your Goodwills or thrift shops and religious organizations. So, you can predict what's going to happen in York. There's going to be, hopefully, more people bring reusable bags, but there's likely going to be a shift with paper bags, increase. And the other thing with York is a lot of tourism there. So tourists, I don't know, when I go on vacation, I just go. So I don't usually bring my reusable bags on vacation. I hate to admit it. But, is that likely going to happen? I don't know. But we'll see. Freeport banned plastic bags and a 5% fee on paper, but it's only grocery and convenience stores. So you can imagine Freeport, the predominant commercial base of Freeport is outlets. So, but again, most people that come up there to go shopping aren't going to bring their reusable bags to buy stuff. And so they just thought, okay, let's do this for now, this approach. South Portland mirrored exactly Portland's ordinance. Kennebunk pretty much exactly matched York's. Again, plastic bags only. And then Falmouth did a 5% fee on all bags, no ban, but it only covers like, I think 5 stores there, so mainly grocery stores, the large, very large grocery stores. But they can always possibly, all these can be adjusted over time. It will be interesting. But this is where it's at with Maine right now. And I should know this, but I think Topsum's is going to be similar to Portland's. And again, Brunswick and Bangor right now are just studying the issue. But the council has been involved, both the councils have been involved, and they're just studying it right now. So it's likely to come up. What's interesting is almost all these have been, the impetus was it by some citizen group. A couple of these were Surfrider, Surfrider, is it Foundation? But the Surfrider, I think Surfrider Foundation has been one of the major catalysts for plastic bag and styrofoam bans throughout the country. And so they were involved in the York, I believe the York and the Kennebunk one. So, some conclusions and observations. So, municipalities can support sustainable materials management through source reduction, but what the options are pretty constrained is what you can do. The banning or reduction of these certain products that are high litter potential, high consumption, viable substitutes, local environmental impacts are the likely targets, and that's exactly what we've seen. So that's worked out so far. And so elimination or reduction, whether through that's fees or making it's always playing around with convenience and inconvenience, has worked pretty well. Education and providing for recycling opportunities just have not worked. It just doesn't support source reduction. If you recycle, that really just actually can be worse. So if you ban one, predominantly it's the plastic bag, then you're going to see all the research shows that there's an increase in paper bags if there's no restriction, no fee, which locally might be beneficial, but from the life cycle is actually more harmful. Now, if you have a ban combined with a fee, or a fee on all bags, just period, based on the research so far, if your goal is source reduction, that's been the most successful by far. Nothing's going to happen in Maine for the foreseeable future. And even if it was, is that something you'd want? So if you look at the difference between Freeport and other communities, they have very different, economic bases, and so you have to be careful what you wish for. So, but I don't necessarily expect anything coming, at least for 16 months. So Maine municipalities is starting to act, but they're varied approaches. Right now it's been in the southern part of the state, but I think what's likely to happen is, and most of so I think we were talking about this earlier, as most of the communities that have done it are like next to each other, all in the same footprint. If Topsum does it, you might see it spread out there because there's a BYOB, bring your own bag, Midcoast chapter. If it happens at Bangor, you might start seeing it spread out from there. The other thing they're looking at right now is, if one thing works, we can expand this. So plastic straws is something that some communities are looking at. And it wouldn't necessarily be banned, but you could restrict it. There's not really many substitutes except going strawless. But the next two, one is plastic bottled drinking water. And I can't believe that this happened, but Concord, Massachusetts banned its sale. So a number of communities, municipalities have done that you can't have bottled water in public government buildings. But they're the first city that said, can't have it, can't sell it if it's drinking water. And it has not been challenged as of yet. And then cosmetic lawn pesticides. So South Portland tried to ban or restrict it. They decided to not go through with that aspect, and it's a voluntary approach right now, but they actually were the first one to do that. So that's also a different type of approach. and I suspect this is going to come up. Some communities have done stuff with sales of GMO food and seeds. So you're starting to see municipalities get more involved in sustainable materials management. Okay, so I'm not going to show this. Werner Herzog fans? Any Werner Herzog? He's an obscure German director. Has the most amazing voice if you listen to him. He did Grizzly Man, which is great. So he did this, he narrated this film. So if you just type in plastic bags, but this is the description. It's the existential journey of a plastic bag searching for its lost maker, which goes out from the store, ends up to the Pacific patch jar, but it's really good. So if you like German existentialism and the journey of plastic bags and art, this is a great, it's like 18 minutes. Thank you.
Probably take one question.
Oh, sorry.
Maybe two in a short. Okay. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Okay, thanks for the excellent presentation. I have one question on your toxicity, because in one of your slides you said it's not the volume of single-use plastic bag, but also the toxicity goes with it.
Oh yeah, and I was speaking just in general, not necessarily plastic bags, but if you're doing source reduction,
right,
it's volume and or toxicity. Yeah.
So my interest is
Yeah.
when I was looking at one of your pictures saying thank you on
Yeah.
the bag, it's not a one thank you, it's 7 thank you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So thank you when you're writing is some kind of chemical you're putting on there.
Sure.
So it's not only a bag you're trying to recycle.
Yeah.
How about those chemicals going with that? Can you write 1 thank you rather than 7? And then the other thing, it's been in my mind for a couple of months now is when I go to a store, department stores, and I see anything, rather than writing any kind of item, says $20, you write $20.99, $19.99, $100.99.
Yeah.
Can you take out that 99 and just make it so you can reduce the use of chemical ink or whatever in 99 because you're trying to recycle that item.
Sure.
Any thought on that?
Well, it's interesting about the bags. If you look at when you're always studying a problem, you want to look at all sides. So I've been looking at the Merchants Association, and they love bags because for them it's mobile advertising, it's marketing, and so they would argue, well, we need more ink to show. Those were the cheapy bags. Thank you. But usually, it's their logo and are all over them, and for them that's a really important advertisement. So. Those things have to be looked at, and that's the importance of doing life cycle assessments and not doing what do we think is the problem, but really studying it. And I don't know about the ink, and the ink on the bag might not be a problem, but the production of that ink. I know we used to use a lot more like chromium-based inks. Luckily, we got more soy-based. But what are the inputs to that? And do you really need the ink? But from a policy perspective, it would be hard to limit your font size. It wouldn't be a popular position, but you have to look at what are those what are the ramifications of that. And I will say briefly, I probably put more information in than I should have. But if anyone has a question, we don't have time. Feel free to email me. But I don't have my email up there. But, if you have questions, ask me. So it's just travis.wagner@maine.edu. So.
Can you stick around for just a few minutes?
Sure,
People have pressing. Okay, well, thank you all for coming very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And, thank you for being here.
Thank you.